Hello YouTube. I'd like to do a little research today. I want to buff up a little area on this Jeep to see what color it's going to come up as. It's certainly faded. And the reason I want to do that is I have to do something with these hinges. They're all chipped. Now I have a sample of powder that is as close as I could get to the color of the Jeep, but it's quite a ways away. And I have a sample that I painted up that's supposed to be the same color, and it's also darker than what the Jeep is. So let's start by taking the hinge off, and then we're going to start by rubbing out the body. Be warned about the bolts that are in this lower hinge. They're not backed up by a plate like the hinges for the hood. These are through bolted, and the bolts actually will fall off if you just try to take the bolt out. And if the dash is in, you're going to have a heck of a time putting them back. So just be warned about it. But you have to put a wrench on the nut and then turn the bolt. So you see it's a nut and a bolt. That was a little bit of a battle. Let's blow some dirt off. Take a little soap and water. And dry that off. Take a little rubbing compound. Wipe the residue off. Take some polishing compound and a new pad. Wipe that residue off. A little car wax. Wipe the residue off. And I think that's about what we can expect. This is where I wasn't really cleaning, but the buffer ran up against, and this is what the color of the Jeep looked like before we rubbed it off. That's not dirt. That doesn't come off. That's the color the Jeep was. And if we look where the paint was protected by the sun, we can see how yellow it is here compared to the Jeep versus where we buffed it out and the color there. So this is a good match. This is probably what it's going to look like. Well, I'd say this one is a pretty good match. It's not great, but it's pretty good. But the powder coat definitely doesn't match. So we're going to have to paint those hinges. With all the window frame, upper door hinge, hood hinges, and lower door hinges all pulled, and the bolts and nuts bagged and tagged, we can move on to the next step, which of course is sandblasting. With all the pieces sandblasted and ready for paint, we'll give them a final bath and brake clean. flip it around and do the other side. And this is primer. That's the first of 2 coats for the primer. We're going to put it under our fan so they dry, and then we'll put a second coat on. The can says wait 5 to 10 minutes or longer between coats, ensuring each coat has dried completely, then spray 3 or 4 coats. Here we go with our first coat of 2J Jamaica Beige. Gee, that's a nice display. Why'd you do that? Well, we're getting ready to clean up all these nuts and bolts, and the way I clean them up is I put them in a tumbler, and that means putting them all together. So what I've done is carefully laid out the bolts and taken pictures of them so I know exactly which bolt goes into what bag. If you look closely, I've got the bolts turned in 3 different directions here, and that's so that I can know what bolt that is. But right now what I'm going to do is mix them all up. We take our collection of bolts that were neatly organized and dump it into the tumbling bin, and some burnishing fluid and some water. Plug it in, and this is what it looks like. We'll put the top on it. The reason I double nut it like this is because I've had this thing vibrate off, and by putting a double nut on it, it can't come loose. And now we'll leave it alone for 3 days and come back, and those bolts will be tumbled and nice and clean. This is the 3rd and final coat of the base coat. Here goes the first coat of clear. They want 4 to 5 coats of clear. This is our 5th and will be our final coat. Our painted hinges are dry to the touch, but I'm going to let them hang here another couple more days before I touch anything. But I think we can compare it and see how it looks. Here's the bracket that bolts to the frame to hold the door restraint, and that's a pretty good match. I'm pretty happy with that. We do have some more hinges to do. We have these hinges to do, and in order to get those hinges, we have to do something about this tire hanger, and I think I'm going to remove it and powder coat it gloss black. But the hinges for the tailgate have to come off. I don't plan to do much with the inside other than clean and buff it up, but I'm going to pretty much leave it alone, and we're looking at carpet. To finish up painting hinges, I've removed the hinges from the rear tailgate, which means I've removed the tailgate. This hinge works fine. This hinge is froze up. So we're going to have to do something about that. So we're going to put these through the same process we put the other hinges through. I'm not going to show it to you, I'm just going to do it. And we're going to move on to the next task. I don't know if you remember, but 3 days ago we put all the nuts and bolts for the hinges and dashboard in this tumbler, and now it's time to take them out, clean them up, separate them, and start using them. And we'll take it off and go rinse it out. We have some very small washers in here, and we don't want them to go down through that hole. So what I'm going to do is take the plug out of the drain and put the plug in the hole, and that way our little washers can't get out. And here we go. Now that we're getting clear water out of our rinses, we want to get as much water out of here as possible. I have a plug inside this drain tube that I pull out, and it'll let the water drain out. We can get a little bit more water by tilting it over, but we don't want any of the triangles to go down the tube because they're a pain to get out. We'll dump everything out on this drip pan. And that's what these are. These are just metal drip pans that you buy at the auto parts store. Spread it out. You can't sort it out now because when it's wet, everything sticks to you, and you can't get it. You can't sort it out. So what we do is run the fan on it, dry it as quickly as we can, and then we'll start pulling the nuts and the bolts out of here. Now that these epoxy triangles are dry and it doesn't stick to your hands or the bolts anymore, we can start to pull bolts out of here and put them in a bucket so that we can sort them out. But these green triangles get into everything. So before you throw them in the bucket to be sorted, you need to get all the triangles out. But you can see they came up really nice. You might ask, why do I tumble things and sandblast things? Tumbling gives you a better finish. That's number one. Number two is that it's unattended work. I can put all these bolts into the bin and let it sit there for 3 days, and when it comes out, they're ready to be painted or powder coated or whatever has to be done. That's the advantage of using the tumbler. Number one, the bolts come out nicer. And number two, I don't have to do the work to get it there. It's a pain to stand there and sandblast bolts and nuts. Once we've pretty much found all the obvious stuff, what I do is I pile everything to one side. And now we just go through it a little bit at a time. Looking for the little stuff. And it takes a little while, but we'll find it. And there we go. There's a lock washer. And this is why we want it dry, because that lock washer would have stuck to one of these green epoxy triangles, and we wouldn't have found it. Now that we've got all the bolts and nuts separated out of the tumbling media, What we have to do is sort the bolts out by type and then put them back near the bag so we know whether they got to be painted or powder coated clear. So what we do is we just take like bolts and make piles. And eventually we'll have them all sorted out. Now that we have all the bolts and nuts and washers all sorted out, we can start putting them back into the bags that they belong in. And by doing that, we'll know where they go and whether they should be painted or whether they should be powder coated clear for natural. For example, this is a picture I took of all these bags laid out. And if we expand it, we can actually read and see the bolts. For example, this is lower dash pad bolts, and we want 4 of them. So we go over here and we find the bolts and set them with the bag they belong in. The next one is upper dash pad screws, and there's 4 of them. And we'll take 4 and put 4 more screws there. And we just work our way across that way. What we're doing here is deciding whether bolts and nuts should be painted or left clear. For example, the bolts holding the steering column, they should be clear. The bolts holding the steering column bracket to the dash, they should be clear. The nuts holding the heater core, clear. Passenger side hinge, they should be painted. Wave washers we'll leave alone, and driver side lower hinge bolts. This one we're going to do clear. What we have here are all the bolts that need to be painted so they'll match the Jeep. And we're going to go through the same paint scheme that we went through with the hinges. I'm not going to force you to watch it. Just know that I did it. And we're starting here now. Here we go. We have all the bolts that are going to be exposed on the outside of the Jeep painted, and they have a pretty good gloss to them. We have the nuts, washers, and bolts that want to remain neutral, all racked up and ready to be powder coated clear. And here we go. What we have to do now is unrack all the bolts and the nuts and put them back in the bags they belong in so that we can start putting them back on the car. With all the hardware properly bagged, we now know where each bolt goes, and we can start to think about putting some of the hinges back on. But before we do that, we have to rub out the body in the area that we're going to mount these hinges, because I don't want to do that once the hinges are mounted. I've changed my mind. I'm not going to put the hinges on just yet. And the reason for that is I'm going to turn the Jeep on its side, and I don't want the hinges flopping around while I'm turning the Jeep on its side. But what we can do is put one hinge on and see how close our color match is. The paint is still a little soft, so I'm going to go easy on it. What do you think? Think it's a good color match? Let me know in the comments. The goal of this video was to try to find a substance, a paint, a powder coat that was a close match for the Jeep. And we came up with a paint. The powder coat was too dark. This is a little too dark too, but it's pretty close. I'm happy with it. I think we met our goals. If you enjoyed this video, there will be more.